Overnight, 9 Americans killed in Mexico in what appears to be an ambush by an organized crime cartel. Family members confirming to NBC News that the victims were American women and their children who died in the attack. The Americans living in Mexico had been reportedly traveling with their children to Arizona for a shopping trip and were in the Mexican state of Sonora, 75 miles south of the U.S. border, when they were caught in the crossfire of gunmen. Among the dead, Renita Miller and her 6-month-old baby twins, Titus and Tiana, Donna Johnson and her son Trevor, and Christina Langford. But her baby Faith miraculously survived.
There was a number of people that were in a motorcade. There were several families traveling to another community, and not very far out of Lamora, then their family come under attack, and there was a number of vehicles, 3 of them in particular, that were shot, and one of them was set fire. My understanding is that there was some children that was able to escape out of the vehicles unharmed.
One of those children, just 13 years old, walking about 14 miles to get help after hiding his bleeding but living siblings in the bushes and covering them with branches. Mexican National Police and military forces dispatched to the area overnight searching for the gunman. It comes amid a string of violent episodes in the country. 14 police officers were killed October 14th in an ambush stemming from violent clashes. Days later, cartel gunmen set off a series of vicious attacks after police captured El Chapo's son. The government forced to release the notorious drug lord's son just hours after capturing him. A spokesman for the U.S. State Department telling NBC News they are aware of the reports of this most recent attack, but so far had no further comment. The U.S. ambassador to Mexico tweeting, "The safety of our fellow citizens is our top priority. I am very closely following the situation between Sonora and Chihuahua."